Hey everybody. In this week's video, it is really a fun one. I'm testing 5 of the most popular editing softwares to see which one makes you reduce noise the best. We'll be testing Photoshop, Lightroom, On1 NoNoise, Luminar 4, and Topaz DeNoise AI. So tons of different great noise reduction softwares. I'm testing on them all to tell you guys which one I think is the best for you to purchase. There's tons of different options. They all have a little bit different interface, different settings, and I'm going to show you guys how all of them work so you can figure out the best noise reduction software for you to get the best results on your photos. I had a ton of fun making this week's video. It's going to be a little bit longer of a video, so let's go ahead and get started. We'll jump right in there. Here we go, guys. Get ready. Alrighty, so I've got my first image open here in Topaz DeNoise AI, and I'm going to walk you guys through a little bit of how this program works and show you guys exactly what I'm going to do to both of these images. So the first thing is that I'm probably going to want to zoom in. This is the image that I will be using. I'm going to go to about 200%, and we are just going to click and drag up. You can see the image is very noisy, and it automatically selects an AI model. It automatically loads in as standard. So all of this is just auto settings that it has predetermined. Now, of course, you can adjust them. You can flip this back to manual and do the adjustments yourself. I'm actually going to use the preset of severe noise here. And we're going to see how that works on this image. And you can see down here, we've got preview, which takes a second to load out over here. And there you go. You can see just like that, we have reduced the noise. Now, one thing that is a little bit annoying about this program to me is that every time you saw I just moved the photo there in the frame, it has to re-update that whole preview for the whole image, which can get a little bit annoying. Now, keep in mind, I am using Sony A7R4 files. They're 61 or 62 megapixels, so they're huge files, so it does take a little bit longer to load. Now, you do have the option to come up here and click Original, and click in release to show the before and after. So you can see it's really, really nice. Now you can use the other presets if you want. You can stick on standard and change these settings. I found that severe noise seemed to be the best thing out there. So I can adjust these settings if I want. I can flip that back to manual, and I don't think it's being over sharpened, so I'm gonna leave the sharpness as is, but I might want to reduce the remove noise. So I might want to add a little bit of noise back in there because I felt like it's getting just really, really, really overly smooth. So that's looking pretty good to me. You do have the option to recover original detail or do some color noise reduction as well if you wanted. So I will play with those. Let's go ahead and recover original detail. And you can see that that's adding a little bit of the noise back there. So I don't want to do this too much, but somewhere about in there looks pretty good to me. Now I'm not going to do any color noise reduction because there's not really any color noise. You may or may not have experienced color noise in your photos before, but in a daytime photo, generally you're not going to experience very much, if any. So you also have the option to change the view. You could do split view, side by side, or comparison. Split view can be nice because then you can kind of scroll over and see the before and after. But I prefer the regular single view and then just toggling original and new. So that's looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and jump to the next image here. All right, so this is the next image that I'm working with. I'm not sure why the preview loaded out in such low quality here, but not a problem. We're going to go ahead and zoom in to 100%. And I want to get a good view here of the foreground and the sky. Let's go ahead and do low light on this one because that is what this photo is low light. So we're going to let that load out here. And these AI models are really helpful. You can see the description here when you hover over this question mark to tell you what each AI model is for. But it's really nice because it's going to use different technology to reduce the noise in your photo. So you can choose each one, and then a lot of times it'll do a good enough job that you can just leave it as is. So let's go ahead and scroll down here. And I'm not too crazy about what it's doing to my foreground here. Or at least what I thought that it was doing to the foreground. It's really just kind of smoothing things out, and there's not a whole lot of detail there in the foreground, which I'm already fully aware of just because of where I shot this, how dark it was, how short the exposure was. Yeah, so you can see it kind of makes it a little muddy. So let's go ahead and recover some original detail here. And this one could use some color noise reduction. Let's just crank it up all the way and see what that does. I'm going to go ahead and leave that as is. Let's drop that a little bit. Let's reduce the enhance sharpness and increase the remove noise. There's a few different settings you can adjust here to kind of dial it in. Even though the AI model does a pretty good job, I always recommend refining it yourself. Of course, that's going to be the best way to do things. And like I said, I know that this photo is really, really noisy. I wanted to get a good night photo where it was just really noisy to test all of these different softwares with. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that as is. Let's actually go up here and look just at the sky. Let's go ahead and zoom in 400%. We'll let that load out really quick. And now we'll toggle the before and after. Before and after. Before, after. So it's looking pretty good. We could potentially do a few more things. Maybe we want to reduce a little bit more noise. We'll let that load out here. And I think that's looking pretty good. I do like what that's doing to the sky. I'm going to go ahead and leave that one as is. So that kind of wraps up how to use Topaz DeNoise. We're going to go in and jump into all the other softwares right after this. Alrighty, so now we are in the brand new On1 NoNoise AI. So you can kind of see the layout here. First thing that I like to do is reduce the size of the image here. Just kind of look at it as a whole, and then after that, I like to go in maybe 50 or perhaps, actually, let's go to 100. And we'll edit it just like this at this level of zoom. If you wanted to go in further, you could click and drag in like that. So I'm going to go over here to the right. We've got a few different settings here to adjust. The first thing is, of course, the luminance. So you can see, looking at the photo now, I'm actually going to zoom in even more here, so you can see it a little bit better on the video. It doesn't look too good in here. It's softening things way too much. So let's go ahead and drop the luminance. And I don't mind the color being at 0 because, again, in this photo, there's not that much color noise. And then we can adjust the enhance details. So I like to leave the enhanced details pretty low when I'm using this. And when I'm adjusting noise, of course, in all of these programs, you'll notice I'm looking at a high detailed spot like this that's in focus. I'm not looking over here in the trees and the low detail spots anyways. So this is looking good. Now, you'll notice you can do some sharpening here in On1, and usually it's not the best to do a ton of sharpening because I'll usually do this sharpening later. You can see it, watch my nose here as I change this detail. So you can adjust these things if you want here, or you can do them somewhere else. I'm not going to do any sharpening here, just because I don't really think that it looks all that great. And I'm just going to adjust the noise to where I see fit. I think that's looking pretty good right there. And the one thing that I like about On1 is it's a lot faster of a loading time. So super fast to just scroll around. And you can also move this bar here, so I can see on the left is before and on the right is after. So I really like that interface that they have designed here. It loads a lot faster, and we will see if the results hold up against all of the other options. It's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and just increase the luminance just a tad bit more. All right, let's go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and move on to this night photo here. Okay, so we're going to move on to this photo here. I am going to zoom in, and let's actually zoom in even more. There we go, right about there. So again, you can see this really lowly detailed photo. And again, the reason why I'm doing that is because I know a lot of you guys probably have photos where the foreground is just completely black and you want to wipe out the noise. So I'm going to show you guys how I go about doing that. You can see as I do this, that it does a pretty good job of selecting just the noise, whereas like I'm looking at the stars, it's not affecting the stars. I'm gonna go in there And we can even enhance the detail. On this one, I might actually bring up the enhanced detail. And you can see the color here is looking a lot better when we use this color noise reduction. So without it, you can see we've got lots of different colors going on. And when we increase it, it kind of flattens them all out to that one simple green color, which we can easily fix later in post-processing. That's looking pretty good for the foreground. Let's go ahead and move over for the sky. And you can see that we are affecting the sky probably a little bit more than I would like. So let's actually go ahead and reduce this to about right there. I don't want to do any sharpening again. Like I said, you can, but I prefer not to do sharpening at this point in time. Let's go ahead and go back out to 100. And on the left is before, on the right is after. I think that's looking pretty good. So we're going to call that good here in On1 NoNoise. You can see it's pretty simple, really easily laid out. I do like how fast it loads, and you've got this option of this bar going back and forth. So now we are over in Luminar 4 here, and this is the same denoise as Luminar AI as far as I am aware at this point in time. So just keep that in mind if you have Luminar AI or Luminar 4, it's going to be the same thing. So first of all, let's go ahead and zoom in on this photo. Maybe I'll zoom in one more time. And just like before, we will increase the luminosity denoise. And we're going to open the advanced settings as well. And we'll wait for this to load out here. You can see that it is a little bit slower than some of the other softwares. So you can see now this is actually loaded out at 85. Let's boost it all the way up to 100 and we'll toggle it. You can see it's hardly having any effect on the image. We're going to go up, and we're going to bring up the boost. I'm going to bring it all the way up to 100. So you can see we're pretty much completely maxed out at how much noise we can reduce from the image. And that's about as good as it's going to get. We can increase the color denoise, but there's not really any color noise in this photo. So unfortunately with Luminar 4, your denoise options are really, really limited here. So that is pretty much what it is. We can use a mask if we wanted. So if we only needed to denoise a certain part of the image, a mask is really nice. But that is all the denoising we can do to this photo here. Let's go ahead and jump to the other photo. And again, I'm going to zoom in to about right there. We are going to bring up the luminosity denoise. And we'll bring up the boost. Let's toggle that on and off, on and off. We're going to bring up the color denoise as well all the way. So you can see we don't have a ton of options here. Just we're pretty limited because we've got all the settings maxed out and still we've got a ton of noise here in the foreground. It does do a pretty decent job in the sky here, I was noticing. We'll toggle that before and after, before and after. Let's look at the core down here, which is really important, obviously, before and after, before and after. Okay, so I'm liking what that's doing. Like I said, pretty simple there. We've got it all the way maxed out. Unfortunately, you don't have a lot of options, but in Luminar 4, I wanted to show you how you would do that and kind of test it and see how it stacks up compared to all of the other software. All right, so now I've got the image open in Lightroom. We're gonna do a little test in Lightroom here as well. I'm gonna click to zoom in and let that load out. And we will just crank the noise reduction slider here. And we can adjust the detail and the contrast as well as the color noise, the detail and the smoothness of the color noise as well. So generally, I like to kind of slide these back and forth. I think that the best thing to do, though, is increase the luminance all the way and then adjust the settings after that. And you can probably drop the luminance a little bit back from that, though. On most photos, I'll increase it all the way, but some of them it just doesn't look good. About right there looks good. Let's try sliding the contrast here. And I don't really like generally what the contrast does. So I'm gonna leave that as is. And then let's adjust the detail. And you can see that that is making it a little more crunchy as well. So we'll go ahead and probably leave it right there. We don't have much color noise, so I'm just gonna zero that all the way out. And then for some reason, you'll actually see now that there is a lot of color noise being introduced. So maybe I want to add this back. Interesting. I'm not quite sure why that is. But when we increase it, it just goes right back away. So That is fine the way it is. You can also adjust the sharpening here, which I'm not going to do. Or I guess we'll just leave that at the default since it was defaulted at 40 there. We'll leave that as is. So let's go ahead and jump over to the night photo. Okay, and same thing here on the night photo. I'm going to zoom in and we are going to increase the noise reduction. And I'm actually liking what that is doing to the rocks here. This one does have a bit of color noise, so we want to increase that. And maybe we will drop the detail or increase the detail. It's hard to say quite yet. I want to bring up the detail just to kind of bring out some detail in the rocks here. And we'll increase the contrast just slightly. You can see that as you increase the contrast and the detail, you do add back a little bit of noise. So you're kind of walking a fine line of how much contrast and detail do you want to add versus how much noise do you want to reduce. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to toggle that here. And that's actually looking really good. So I'm liking how these are looking from Lightroom. So we're going to go ahead and call that good. We're going to jump into one last program here before we do a little comparison. Alrighty, so lastly, we are here in Photoshop. We're going to reduce the noise here as well. So we are going to go up to Filter. We're going to go down into Noise, and we are going to go to Reduce Noise. Now, this box pops up. It's nice to scroll over to the high detailed spots of your scene, like my face, which is what we've been doing. And we can adjust the settings. Now, I believe these are the default settings. It's already a little too weak, so I'm going to turn the strength up. And we can also check advanced if we want. You've got the options to reduce noise per channel or overall. Now you can go in and reduce noise, like if there was a lot of noise in the blue channel, for example, you could do that here. We are not gonna do that here just because it's really, really advanced noise reduction. And I kind of wanted to show basic noise reduction in this tutorial. So we're gonna go ahead and just stick to the basics and go from there. So we've got strength at 10. Let's reduce the preserve details. And as we reduce the preserve details, you can see now we have a little bit more noise being reduced. Now let's try the sharpen details. So you can try a few different things here. You can see that's really increasing the noise quite a bit. So we'll go back and forth. You can see as soon as I add in any preserve details, it really adds that noise back in. So I'm going to stick right around 3%. I think that's probably about as good as we're going to get it. There's not really much color noise, so we'll leave that as is. Let's go ahead and hit OK, and we will let that one load out there. All right, now let's go ahead and jump over to the next photo. So again, I've got this photo. I'm going to go up to Filter, down to Noise, over to Reduce Noise. And I probably want to come up here, which is where I've been looking at most of these from. Again, we've got the strength at 10. We are going to drop that preserve details. We're going to increase the reduce color noise because there is a lot of color noise. Maybe we'll drop the sharpen details. And there we go. You can see that's looking all right. Not too bad. Let's play with the strength a little bit here. And it's looking all right, right around there, I would say. The color noise is doing a good job of being reduced down there. Maybe I'll just increase that all the way to 100. It's looking pretty good. And yeah, we don't want to do the sharpen details too much here. And you can see every time I adjust something, the preview of the original comes out, which is kind of annoying, but just kind of is what it is. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to hit OK. So that wraps up how we go about reducing noise in Photoshop there. Next thing I'm going to do is combine all of these images so we can compare and contrast all of the different noise reduction techniques. All right, so I've opted to open all of the images as layers in Photoshop because it's really easy for me to toggle and just show different ones at the same time. So I've got them all open in Photoshop here, but these images are all labeled with where I've done the denoising in. So NoNoise AI, Luminar 4, Lightroom, Topaz, and Photoshop. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit plus to zoom in here. And we will look at each of the photos. We'll look at a few different spots on each photo. So first you can see we've got NoNoise AI is this one right here. And now let's go ahead and look at Luminar 4. This is what the noise reduction in Luminar 4 produced. This is Lightroom here. This is Topaz. Now the problem with Topaz is because I'm using the free trial, it has a watermark on it, unfortunately. So we'll look somewhere down here. And we've got Photoshop. So I think that there is definitely no secret here. The programs that reduce the least amount of noise with the settings that I use, not to say that you can't change the settings and get maybe better results, but these are the settings that I got, which I thought would provide me the best results. But Photoshop and Luminar 4 both don't appear to do a whole lot. I can definitely say that it does look like Luminar 4 has done a better job than Photoshop. Right now I'm looking at Luminar 4. This is Photoshop. So I'm going to rank Photoshop at the bottom here. We'll move Luminar down. I'm kind of going to do a ranking of top to bottom in terms of what is the best. Now let's look at Lightroom here. So Lightroom has done a pretty decent job. And let's compare that with Topaz. So we've got Topaz here and Lightroom. And Topaz and Lightroom. It's really interesting how reducing the noise, we have kind of changed the colors of our scene or the brightness, which is not really something that generally happens. So really interesting there, but I will say that Topaz definitely does a better job than Lightroom. So we'll rank Lightroom third there. So now we've just got Topaz and On1 NoNoise. And when I toggle this, you can see, especially I'm kind of looking right here on my shoulder, NoNoise has added a little bit of weird spots with noise in them, and especially down here as well. You've just kind of got weird spots with some noise, some color noise too, that I'm not really liking. So for that reason, I think I would rank Topaz at the very top. Like I said, we unfortunately have this Topaz logo right in the center because I only have the free version here. I want to look at a few other spots on the image. Let's look at like a spot that's not in focus, perhaps back here on these trees. And let's just go down the list. So Topaz, here is On1 NoNoise. Here is Lightroom, Luminar 4, and Photoshop. Going back up, let's start from the bottom. Photoshop, Luminar 4, Lightroom, On1 NoNoise, On1 NoNoise again, Lightroom, and I'm just toggling this back and forth. This is On1 NoNoise, and Topaz. So On1 NoNoise, Topaz. On1 NoNoise, Topaz. And let's check one more spot, maybe over here on the ferns. Right about in here looks good. Let's go from the top down. So we've got Topaz. We've got On1 NoNoise, which these look very similar in this spot over here. We've got Lightroom. And you can see compared to NoNoise and Topaz, Lightroom has really killed the quality over here, whereas On1 NoNoise has maintained this quality that we see over here. And the one thing that you'll notice about On1 NoNoise, you can see in this leaf here, you've kind of got a little bit of color noise, and perhaps we could have reduced that, but it looks like on Topaz it is a little bit flatter. So we'll go down Luminar 4 and then Photoshop. So you can see that is kind of how I feel about this photo here. Topaz did the best, followed closely by On1 NoNoise, then followed by Lightroom, and Luminar 4 and Photoshop definitely taking up last place on this image here. Let's go ahead and jump over to the night image and see if we get similar results. All right, so I've went ahead and reorganized this in the same order that we had our first photo in terms of what they stacked up to be, but let's look if that holds to be true. In this photo, we're gonna look specifically in the sky and then in the foreground. The first thing I wanna look at is in the foreground. You can see it's really lowly detailed, and some of the noise reduction software had to select the spots that it wanted to reduce noise and go from there. And you can see that Topaz did not do a good job of selecting up here where there is noise on those rocks. So we will toggle that on. We've got On1 NoNoise here. We've got Lightroom. We've got Luminar 4, and we've got Photoshop. So I would say Luminar 4 is probably the worst one here. Let's drop Luminar to the bottom. Now we're looking at Photoshop. We've got Lightroom, and I'm actually really liking what Lightroom has done here. So I'm going to move Lightroom up to the top, I think. We'll hide that. So now we're looking at Photoshop again, and we can compare that with On1 NoNoise and Topaz. And I'm not a huge fan of what Topaz has done for the foreground here in terms of just kind of blurring things out. So we're going to drop that one down. And On1 NoNoise has done an all right job, but still not up to my standards, I would say. So we will go ahead and drop this one down as well. And I would say that actually Lightroom has done the best job, at least on the foreground here. Now that is looking pretty decent. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the sky as well. I want to see how they stacked up in the sky. We'll zoom in here. And let's go down to the bottom. We've got Luminar 4 first. And Luminar 4 looks all right, but it appears like it kind of cut down on the stars. Let's compare it with Photoshop and Luminar 4 and Photoshop. So Photoshop has not done a very good job here. We'd probably drop Photoshop all the way to the bottom. Let's look at On1 NoNoise, and you can see there's a big improvement there. And when you toggle it on, you can see that NoNoise hasn't reduced the brightness of the stars like Photoshop and Luminar. So when we toggle On1 NoNoise on, those stars are still nice and bright, which is good to see. So we can toggle on Topaz. Topaz looks pretty good as well. You can see we've reduced a little bit less noise than On1 NoNoise. So for that reason, I'm going to drop Topaz down. And then Lightroom here. And you can see that Lightroom has done an all right job, but it's kind of made things a little muddy in the sky. So I think for that reason, I would prefer On1 NoNoise for these night photos. And I know it didn't do the best job on the foreground, but on night photos, I'm probably more concerned about the noise reduction in the sky because most of my night photos, I'm not going to have this horribly exposed foreground like I do in this photo. So that kind of wraps up my thoughts here on this software. And I would say that for night photos, On1 NoNoise is definitely going to take the cake there in terms of what it's done for the sky. Whereas for day photos, I really like Topaz. I'm going to do a little bit more testing and make sure that these hold up. But I think that that is kind of my initial first thoughts on which noise reduction software is going to be the best for you to denoise your photos. So there you guys have it. You can draw your own conclusions from this video, or what I would recommend is purchasing either On1 NoNoise or Topaz DeNoiser. Now, of course, you would expect these two to be the best because they are their own standalone or plug-in applications to reduce noise, whereas all three of the other things I tested were just regular photo editing software that had a denoise capability built into it. So in this tutorial, you can see that I did like the Topaz DeNoiser for the daytime photo a little bit more, while I liked the On1 DeNoise for our nighttime photo. Now, this will hold true. I tested it with a few other photos. This holds true with those photos as well. Now, we're really nickel and diming these programs, so to speak. They are both incredibly good. You will be satisfied with either one. I'm going to go ahead and put a couple links down below where you can pick up this software. Would highly recommend either one of these two for whatever photo needs you have. They can both be used as a plugin with Photoshop, Lightroom, or many other photo editing software, so it's really nice. Now, if you don't like the way that I edited my photos, maybe you said, well, Austin, you should have done this differently in this program and you would have got better results. I'm sorry, this is what I did to the best of my knowledge. I am just someone that hopped in. I wanted to denoise my photos, and I did it the way that I thought would work best. So if there was a better way to do it, unfortunately, it wasn't obvious enough that I figured it out. So this is the way that I've done it. Hopefully this tutorial was really helpful for you guys. Hopefully, if nothing else, you at least got to see the interface of a few of these really nice programs. Some of them even have free trials that you can use to make sure that you like the software before forking out your hard-earned money for the software. I want to thank you guys so much for checking out this week's video. It was really fun for me to make. I'm not even kidding, and I hope that it was helpful. So if you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below. Make sure to like and subscribe, of course, and we will see you guys next weekend. Thank you so much. Have a great one. Bye-bye.